May God bless you. Well, we were supposed to get hit pretty hard with Hurricane Ian, and I'm so thankful it veered a little bit to the east and pretty much missed us. I mean, we had wind and rain and lost power for almost a day, but no catastrophic stuff around here. And so I'm thankful. I know people pray, and the mystery of all of that is beyond my pay grade. But I know God does hear and answer prayer, and He does and allows what is best, even hard times sometimes. And so I'd be thanking Him even if we got hit hard, but I'm thanking Him for sparing us and praying for the people who did get hit hard, as I guess many are praying. And some may still get it bad. I haven't really watched the news today. So this is part 2 of 3 of a series of thoughts about why I think it's time to hunker down our hearts, make preparation for that great storm of the end times, the tribulation that's on the way, and I think very imminent. And so biblical reasons as to why I think that is the case. And I ended kind of abruptly in the first video with saying I'd read from Zechariah chapter 12. And I'll go ahead and read that verse and then give a little explanation and go on from there. The word of the Lord concerning Israel. I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. Judah will be besieged as well as Jerusalem. On that day, when all the nations of the earth have gathered against her, I will make Jerusalem an immovable rock for all the nations. All who try to move it will only injure themselves. This is amazing prophecy from 520 BC, prophet Zechariah in the Old Testament, the Jewish Tanakh. And God is saying, tiny Jerusalem, tiny Israel, will become a focal point of the world's angst. He says, a cup that sends all the surrounding peoples reeling. A cup of trembling, another translation says. I think of it as a focal point of the angst of the world. What's going to happen in the Middle East? And so Israel, of course, had to become a nation again for this prophecy to be fulfilled, but that the nations would gather around her to destroy her. And this happened in 1948 at the very inception of the nation of Israel, and then again in 1967 when they were attacked by all the surrounding peoples, nations, and then again in 1973 on their high holy day of Yom Kippur, a surprise attack from the surrounding nations. And each of those wars led to Israel miraculously having defeated their enemies and regaining more of the territory of ancient Israel. And so now, again, that prophecy that Jesus made in Luke 21, that Jerusalem would be trampled under the feet of the Gentiles, having been destroyed and the people scattered among the nations, that Jerusalem would be the end of the age, or the end of the age of the Gentiles, would be when Jerusalem is no longer trampled under the feet by the Gentiles, or of the Gentiles. And that has happened. And most recently in 2017, Jerusalem was finally named the capital of Israel, to be recognized by the nations of the world. So, amazing prophecies. Again, I know I said it multiple times, but to think that a nation the size of New Jersey would become a focal point of the angst of the world is quite amazing. The Bible is quite an amazing book. So, in addition to that, staying on the topic of Israel a little longer as end times predictor, is that the ancient Jewish temple has to be rebuilt before the tribulation is underway, or at least during that 7-year tribulation period, which will bring about the end of of the age as we know it. And in this is spoken of both in Daniel and in Matthew, Mark, and in Thessalonians. Daniel 9, Daniel 11, Daniel 12, Matthew 24, 13, or Mark 13, and 2 Thessalonians 2. Some of these prophecies speak of Antichrist at the end of the age who would basically make a treaty with Israel, with the Jews, and then in the middle of the tribulation break that treaty and desecrate the temple by setting himself up as God in the Jewish temple. And so therefore Israel would have to be a nation again, and the temple would have to be built. Presently on the temple site of the second temple is the second most holy Muslim mosque in the world, called the Dome of the Rock. And that has held up the rebuilding of the third temple. The Jews in Israel, especially the Orthodox Jews, are very zealous and very excited about rebuilding their ancient temple. The Temple Mount Institute has already drawn up the blueprints. They have the funding, they have the resources, they've already made the implements that will be yet necessary in the priestly duties and even the sacrificial system being renewed in the temple. They are actively searching for those young men who would meet the qualifications to be priests once they build the temple. And they also, this might sound strange, but they just received in the last 2 weeks or so the famous red heifers. They've been waiting for these red heifers. It has to do with the ceremonial cleansing of the priests involving the ashes of a red heifer. A heifer's a cow, of course. And these were just shipped in from Texas. They've got some red heifers. And there's a lot of ruckus and excitement in Israel about that among these rabbis. In any case, that's an interesting little factor. Not a big deal, but I think an interesting thing that this temple has not existed since the time of Herod's temple that was destroyed by the Romans since AD 70. And so let's say close to 2,000 years, and now they're on the brink of doing it. The only thing that holds them back is they think that this Muslim mosque is where their temple needs to be, which creates a dilemma, and I'm not sure how that will be resolved. Some are saying maybe that's not the real temple site, there's another spot, and so they're wrestling through that. And so interesting as well, and I'll add this in, one of the prophecies is that during the end times, the Jews who, as a nation, primarily the leaders, the power brokers, the religious leaders of the day of Jesus, rejected their Messiah and had him crucified. The multitudes of the people loved Jesus overall and flocked to him, but the nation, in a sense, rejected their own Messiah, and of course we know they were scattered among the nations as the prophets foretold, regathered now. And in the end days, the scriptures tell us that the Jewish people, many of them, will come back and realize that they had crucified their Messiah. And that is spoken of later in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, where God is speaking, and this is important, God is speaking in the first person. And he says, "And in those days I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. And they will look upon me, the one whom they have pierced. And they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son." Amazing verse. God is speaking of those last days and how he will pour out this spirit of grace and supplication in some way to stir the hearts of the people to desire and look for and cry out for their Messiah, and that somehow their eyes will be opened and they'll realize that they had pierced their Messiah, that is an amazing prophecy. It coincides with Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22, which were messianic prophecies of the piercing of the Savior. But these written, of course, before he came. And so I think that as well is coming to fruition even now. There's a group in Israel that I admire greatly and follow their website somewhat. It's called oneforisrael.org. They have a website as well called imetmessiah.com, which is a compilation of 100 or so very brief testimonial videos of Jewish men and women who are telling the stories of their spiritual journeys that brought them many paths to Jesus, Yeshua in Hebrew, to their Messiah. And it's pretty interesting if you get a chance to check it out. But this returning to the Messiah, we would call them Messianic Jews who are Jewish but Christian. And by the way, those videos have, last time I checked, over 19 million views in Israel alone. Over 19 million views of videos showing Jews coming to Jesus in Little Israel is amazing. And this also is pointing to the end times when many of the Jews will be symbolically grafted in, back in to God and through Jesus Christ, Romans 11.